Welcome, I'm Anna Galetli, and we are now going to start looking at Unit 4, beginning with bone tissue and an introduction to the skeletal system. So this slide is in your PowerPoint notes, and you can go through and memorize this. You should know the basic functions of the skeletal system. Another review slide. When we did the connective tissue chapter unit, we spent a lot of time on the hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage. Remember that a system is composed of multiple types of tissues, and even though we're studying the skeletal system and you want to focus in on bone, you need to also focus in on cartilage and also eventually ligaments as we start to study the joints. The systems of the body are not composed of one tissue type, they're composed of multiple tissue types. So cartilage is really very important to the skeletal system. All right, focusing in now on bone. Fancy term for bone, osseous tissue. All right, we're going to divide that up into cortical bone and cancellous or trabecular or spongy bone. You'll notice that there's a lot of synonyms here. Cortical and compact. Compact meaning dense. Cortical meaning it's the outer edge. Spongy bone is what we often use to call the stuff on the inside, but sometimes we will use the word cancellous. That basically means porous. So that's describing what it looks like. And trabecular, which is named after the word trabeculae, which is describing these little ribbons or curls of bone as they form in the medullary cavity area. So you can call it spongy, cancellous, or trabecular. You need to know all of the terms, okay? The spongy bone is where you're going to find your bone marrow. We have two kinds. You've got your red and your yellow. You'll discuss that more in your lecture course. Let's go on and look at the next slide. All right, here's a slightly overexposed photo of the knee cross-section model that we use in our A&P lab. What I want you to know are the basic features. You can take this picture yourself from your PowerPoint slides and you can label it over and over again, erasing it and redoing it. So you're going to notice right here, this is the compact bone. So all of this in here is compact bone. Okay? And then all of this in here, all of this is spongy bone, all in here. And you can see the little curls of ribboned bone, all right, that create this kind of weave or sponge-like appearance. Those are your trabeculae, which is why we also sometimes call it trabecular bone. And there are other aspects or other features on this cross-section model that you're going to learn, but let's continue on and look at some of the diagrams. All right, more definitions. You need to know all of these and you need to know examples of them. Know your average number of bones that you find in the body. All right, again, we're going to go on and we're going to look at diagrams of all of these structures, but all of these are important vocabulary words. You need to know all of them, their definitions, examples, explanations. All right, so now let's discuss all of that vocabulary as we are actually looking at the structures. So first of all, let's look at the diaphysis. The diaphysis is the shaft of a bone. All right, we tend to use this with all of our long bones that have those kinds of structures. The epiphysis is going to be the end up in here. And then down here, this is also the epiphysis. Now, if you go deeper into osteology and you get really interested in it, you will learn that this middle area in here is called the metaphysis. I'm not going to test you on that, but in case you were wondering, because you desperately want to know, that's what it's called. All right, so between the epiphysis and the diaphysis, your bone is going to grow. And when it's a nice thick wedge right here, we call this the epiphyseal. Oops, I'm misspelling that. Actually, let's do it over on the other side where we've got the other term for it. We call this the epiphyseal plate. And this is a thick wedge of hyaline cartilage that is going to be turned into bone as you grow. Now, as you stop growing and you start to go into your adult formation, it basically kind of becomes a little bit of scar tissue which you see right here in this white line that I'm now making yellow, and it goes all the way across. All right, we call that the epiphyseal line. That will eventually fade as you finish growing. Okay. What's next? Let's look at cancellous bone versus compact bone. So again, your compact bone is this outer edge, goes all the way around the outside right here. All right, that is all compact bone. If we come over to this picture, you can see a blow up of it, and you can see that the bone is just very densely packed, and it creates these sheets that we call lamella. We'll look at that more in a minute. Cancellous bone is also called your spongy bone, and that's going to be in here where those thin sheets of trabeculae form. Looking up here, you can see a blow up of the trabeculae. Now, I know that those two probably look similar, but really this is a magnification issue. This is higher mag, making those trabeculae look like they might be as thick as what you're seeing down below, okay? Now, on the epiphysis, I drew in the dark blue the cortical bone. Right here, outside of it, is something we call articular cartilage. This is actually made up of hyaline cartilage. And that's going to be coating the ends of the bones so that when they move, they don't rub up against each other. It's a protective feature. All right, what's next? The medullary cavity. So this is where it gets hollowed out. So the ends that are really dense, we call that your where you have your bone marrow, okay? And that'll be red up in there. And then here, it's kind of hollowed out. You can see the trabeculae along the edges here and here, all right, lining the walls, and then the rest of this is kind of hollowed out. And that is where you have your yellow marrow. That's the stuff when you see dogs chewing on bones and they're cracking it open to get to the stuff on the inside. That's what they're really going for, is this yellow marrow, because it's full of fat, so it's really nutrient rich. That should be a red. I didn't spell that very well. Actually, that looks awful. Let me just write it neatly. And of course, I'm doing it in green just to be confusing. So bone itself needs supporting tissue just like any other place. So on the outside of the bone, you're going to have periosteum, and this is going to be a fibrous connective tissue. And if we come over here and we look at the blow up, you can see the fibrous CT here. You can also see these little strands right here, which are ligaments that we call Sharpie's fibers, and they're basically just holding this periosteum onto the bone. This stuff is adhered so tightly, you could take a pair of pliers and you wouldn't be able to rip it off. If you want to get it off, you basically have to boil it in order to break down these fibers, or you can put it on a grill. So yeah, if you want to see what this looks like, grill some ribs, and then when you see the sheet come off the bone, that's your periosteum. Now, that's coating the outside of the compact bone, periosteum. Okay, now we have something called endosteum. So endosteum. This is basically the same stuff as periosteum, but it's going to be thinner, more delicate, and it's going to be only coating these trabeculae in the medullary cavity, in the spongy bone marrow area. I think that's everything on this slide, so let's move on to the next slide. All right. On the next slide, we're going to be looking at a diagram, but right here are all the explanations of the different structures. In case you miss anything that I'm saying, you can go back and refer to this. All right, this is my favorite slide for demonstrating what compact bone looks like. Now, compact and cortical bone have slightly different structures. This course doesn't have enough time to really go into spongy bone or cortical bone, trabecular bone, so we're just going to focus in on what cortical bone looks like. So the cortical bone is going to be this really dense stuff right here, and then right there is your spongy bone. Okay? Now, the structural unit of bone is called an osteon, which is also called a Haversian system. And that's going to be these things right here. Okay, so this nice circle. What you do with this is you have a hole, a tunnel down the center, and that is going to be called the Haversian canal. Another term for this is central canal. And a blood vessel goes down that. Then you will have a ring of lamellae, and then there's another ring and another ring and another ring. In between those rings, you'll have dark spots, And these spots are your osteocytes. So those are the mature cells. The rings of the lamellae, all right, lamella right here, all right, that goes with this structure. That's where you have your mineral components. So that's your calcium, your phosphorus, magnesium. And then in between them, as I said, you will have this little cavity, okay? And in that cavity, you will have your osteocyte. So that is the living cell, okay? The lacuna is the cavity or the house for it. Now notice that this lacuna, this osteocyte here, it has little projections of itself that go down into these little cracks. These cracks are called canaliculus, singular, canaliculi, plural. This connects the cells, okay? So it's a cell, it's alive. That means it needs oxygen. Well, you get oxygen by having a blood vessel coming up your central canal. All right, now you got to get stuff from this capillary into the cells. So things are going to diffuse and they're going to go into here and they're going to touch these feelers from the osteocytes and then it can diffuse. Now right here, this osteocyte comes up into here and this one comes around into here and it can then diffuse up this way and then it can diffuse and go up into this one. And so that connects things up. All right, so let's back out to how you get the blood supply. So right here, this sheet is the periosteum. You will see a nice big fat blood vessel in here that I'm overcoloring in red again. It's going to have a perpendicular vessel that goes through. This is called a Folkman's canal, where the blood vessel goes. Sometimes these are called perforating. And then these are going to connect up all of the, I'm going to change color so it's easier to see, these central canals that are going through the osteons. All right, and so that's bringing blood. And then this can diffuse out here and then diffuse here, go here, can come up and diffuse into that one, and it diffuses up there. And then it can come over here and it can come out through here. And that way you can keep all of those osteocytes alive. So that is the blood flow pattern. You do need to know that pattern. It's in your lab exercises and you will study that. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right, here's a favorite model of mine that we have in our A&P labs. This is an Osteon model, and you need to really get that into your head what you're looking at when you're studying this. So right here in the middle, you have that central canal, and that is where you're going to have blood vessels. So you can see the red artery or the red capillary, and then you've got some, looks like neuron, and then you've got a vein. All right, and then wrapping around that are the lamellae, all right, and they are going to go around and around and around. So each one of these things, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lamellae that are part of this right here, this osteon, okay? Now this section right here, this is actually called interstitial lamellae, so this is like a remnant of an old osteon. So this is interstitial, I know that's hard to read, lamellae in that color. Let's switch colors. All right, now sandwiched between the lamellae, I have, actually let's go back to this color, red, and they're using that to show the lacuna. So that's the lacuna. Now over here, I have empty lacunae, right? So lacunae is plural, lacuna is singular. And then I can see these red crazing lines. These are the canaliculi, okay? Within the lacuna, I have my osteocyte that I am coloring in blue. All right, notice how I am writing on this and labeling it and practicing it. You can print these out from your PowerPoint slides. You could also just draw them out on a piece of paper. I highly recommend that you practice that. So over here, this is the superior view. Let's come over and look at a lateral view, okay? What I like is, again, I can see the cavity where I have a lacuna. I can see the little crazing lines, which really show nicely how the canaliculi hook up. And then I have right in there my osteocyte, okay? All right, let's move on. All right, here we have a photomicrograph of the osteon. So we're looking at this under high magnification a microscope slide. So, and again, it's all compact bone. So right here, they are outlining an osteon. And you can see there's another osteon here and another osteon there. Each one of these is an osteon. It can also be called a haversian system. The center right here is your central canal. And that's where you're going to have blood. Now, here I can see a lamella. And then I can see another lamella up here. And then I can see another lamella here. It's very difficult to see the edges of the lamella. What I do instead is I focus on the osteocytes in the lacuna. Now, you can't distinguish the two of them at this magnification. You just have to know that there's both an osteocyte and a lacuna right there. So if I come here and I kind of draw these in, well, then I can kind of see where my lamellae are. So here's a lamella in between the rows of the osteocytes. Okay? Now, really faintly, and I don't even know how to do this light enough. I'm here to pick a gray color. So I've got these little things that look, you can't even see that. I wonder if white would work. Yeah, that works a little bit better. You've got these teeny tiny cracks, and this is like so overdoing it. But I think you can see what I'm saying right here. Those are your wrong color. Those are the canaliculi, which are helping to move that blood back and forth. Or the things that are diffusing between the cells and the canaliculi. You don't actually have blood flow through the canaliculi. All right, and then again, you've got the areas where you don't have a proper osteon, but you still have remnant lamellae from old osteons. That's where you have your interstitial lamellae. All right, so that was the last of the slides in this section. We're going to go on to the next section in Unit 4, where we're going to start looking at the skull.